Valery, the Deputy Head of the Presidential Administration of Ukraine. Good afternoon. Today, traditionally, I would like to first give you some information after you heard about ATO and about current events. I would like to inform you about foreign activity of Ukraine and the President of Ukraine and the priorities, the tasks which we have to address in the nearest time. It's obvious that after a very important and successful visit of the President of Ukraine to Milano, to Italy, is being discussed, and without all the details, the President has provided this information in the interview, and I have already informed about that, and the Minister as well. But one conclusion that we have discussed already is that the result of that visit for us is a clear position, united position of European partners as to support to Ukraine. And these words, which sounded a few days ago as just words, are being executed now in specific actions. You know that there was a meeting of the Council of European Union. The ministers of foreign affairs had the meeting, and they passed a document which provides for the position of the European Union, which is to support Ukraine, not to recognize the annexation of Crimea, to support the three main priorities of execution of Minsk agreements, and that's closing the border, ceasefire, and completing the exchange of hostages and prisoners, monitoring of OSCE as well. These are also the key issues in Minsk agreements and the Minsk protocol and memorandum from the 19th of September, basic documents which are to be implemented. It's about this line of separation. Ukraine is not planning to change any coordinates of this line. As to another issue, the recent one, and that's non-legitimate, illegal pseudo elections. And we hear the statements about them in some areas of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. The partners stated clearly that it's not acceptable to recognize the results of that, and that torpedoes the peaceful plans. The elections are to be held peacefully in accordance with Ukrainian legislation. The president signed the law on specific features of self-governance in the eastern regions. And according to that, the 7th of December could be the date which is the legitimate date. But it's not about the dates. Any attempt to elect the parliament and the president of the so-called Donetsk and Lugansk republics is the way to nowhere. It will not be recognized by the international community and will only complicate the situation. And that is why the European Union gives a clear signal about non-acceptance of this scenario and about illegitimate elections. And also there is a support to finding the way to negotiate with Donbass, and that is also our compromise. And it's about the elections to the Verkhovna Rada, but the statements made from the representatives of the so-called republics in Donbass, and now there are many of them being created there, more than a dozen. they cause concern. There was a statement made by three such representatives who stated that the next step after elections in the region will be attack, or the next point is Kiev, and that talk just certifies the fact that these people are not adequate. How are they planning to ensure the development of these regions? How are they planning to provide pensions and salaries to people who live there? I do not know, but probably the objective is to keep situation unstable, to keep the wound which will be open on the territory of Ukraine. But that is done to achieve other objectives, but with the support and with the understanding of international community, I believe we are moving in the right direction. The fact that the decision has been made by the Committee of European Parliament that from the 1st of November we will continue the preferential regime for Ukrainian trade, and that this decision, there was an attempt to not to have it passed, and that was done by pro-Russian lobby, but that attempt failed, and I am sure that this will be supported by European Parliament and will have the version that was our objective. And I would like to remind you that's a privileged regime till the end of the next year, under which Ukraine has serious assistance from European Union via zero rates, and we also preserve the regime to get ready for the competition and to get ready for implementing the agreement on the free trade area with European Union. I would like to state it clearly. Personally, myself, I receive questions about this delay of association agreement. I would like to emphasize there's no delay with the association agreement. There's a clear decision made that from the 1st of November that agreement is applied. Only the fourth section about the FTA, but all other sections which are on institutional cooperation, sectoral cooperation, on political dialogue, justice, freedom, everything which is a roadmap for reforms, for anti-corruption reform, for judicial reform, everything which is important for the civil society. This chapter, there was a question, but I can tell you that the civil society, symbolically in Vilnius, when the previous authorities did not sign the association agreement, but there were two articles signed on the interaction between civil society. Now it's very clear, it's binding legally, and now we need to start actively working on implementation of association agreement. Taking into account the questions that are asked, especially about energy sector, it is important for Ukraine to have financial support from European Union till the 22nd, till tomorrow. The decision is to be made about the third tranche of the first stage of macro-financial assistance, which is 260 million euros, and I believe in November this money will come to Ukraine. The next stage, another 250 million, which will be the fourth part of the first tranche. And then we expect 5 million in the next period, and now we are preparing to the third wave of macro-financial assistance, which is from 1 to 2 billion euros. Basically, European Union has given the signal on that in Milano at the meeting of the President of Ukraine with Barroso and Rompuy. that has been stated, and that's not just symbolic, it's quite realistic, so that in these difficult years in the economy of war to help Ukraine. That is important. And it is important also to understand the other side of the medal. Ukraine has to implement reforms irrespective of the aggression, the external aggression. We have no right now to lose, to waste time. And that is the element that has been stressed in the decision of the Council of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs. They approved the passing of anti-corruption package of laws, the laws on prosecutor's office, which now was passed, and we adopt now European rules in this sphere. It is important for us that the parliament works. The parliament works so that immediately after elections. And there are many tasks on implementing the legislation. There are issues which require quick decisions to be passed by the parliament, and I hope that the next parliament will be more pro-European. It cannot be different because the tasks for Ukraine in the nearest years are to implement realistic reforms, to prepare laws which would be European, and also in 5 years to be able to talk about the possibility to submit application for the membership in the EU. Not today, but in the future. I believe this should be our task, and we need to specify the time frame. In this context, the strategy of reforms 2020, its implementation is very significant. We have to coordinate our efforts, and I believe the government will be formed quickly after the elections in the parliament. And the president is ready to suggest ideas and proposals to get parliamentary support. Why is that important? Because the tranches of the European Union, they are provided if Ukraine fulfills certain tasks, and that's on the submission of the budget in time and some other issues which we have to do. A few words on the plans for the future. Milano is not just what we heard in different formats, not just different meetings in different formats. There were some bilateral meetings, important ones. There was a meeting with the Polish president, and the exchange. They were discussing using Polish experience not just in issues of decentralization, but in anti-corruption fight. With the Prime Minister of Austria, they were talking about very specific things. There were about 10 meetings with the leaders of different countries, and now we have to continue these bilateral. We will continue these bilateral relations. The first priority for us is Poland, and now we will deepen institutional relations with Poland, because our interaction, our pragmatic cooperation should be supplied by specific mechanisms. We are talking about organizing consultative committee between the presidents of Poland and Ukraine, and then there will be summit visits of the presidents of both countries. And we are working with the Visegrad Group countries, with the countries which were not included into multilateral formats, on settling the situation in Donbass. These countries are also very important for us traditionally, and we'll be enhancing this cooperation because today it is important for us to get support and also to develop the roadmap for the future. And in the end, I would like to mention that any statements that we need to renew a large-scale war or we need to start war, they today are not the line that is supported. We support the strong development of the army, the defense of the country, but also with the support of the whole world community. Without that support, without the support of European Union, both economic and political, and military technical support, it will be very difficult to win and to get peace. And I believe that this is the right direction. It's complicated. There will be more challenges in the future, but today Ukrainian diplomacy under the leadership of the president is ready to implement all the tasks. And I would like to emphasize also that at the same time we are reforming our diplomatic service, which is not easy, but in principle we are trying not to waste time, and I believe this reform will be one of the first ones to be implemented. A lot of work is being done there. Even though we do not have big resources, we have problems with financial support, but we optimize our diplomatic service and the mechanisms of foreign activity of the country. I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you.
Скажите, пожалуйста, господин Чалый, вот вы упомянули 1-2 миллиарда дополнительных
You mentioned 1-2 million.
третьей волны. Можете уточнить, когда вы ожидаете эту помощь и сколько сейчас стране нужно?
How much money, additional money, does the country need from IMF to cover economic problems right away by the end of the year? What is the real need of Ukraine? As to time, it will be the second tranche or the second stage of. We can start speaking about that money starting in January, and it's clear that we speak about 500 million that will not receive them right now, so they will not cover the gaps you mentioned. The issues which are urgent, what we need, that is for gas and energy sector. And here's an issue not in the amount of money, but when we can get that. So everybody knows how much we need. It's up to 2 billion, a little bit less, up to 2 billion. But the problem is that that money, under the conditions of this, under these conditions, that money should be an international support MF for European Union, and they should cover also the gap in terms of payback in time. I can tell you that in Milan, after Milan, we can say that Ukrainians will not be without gas, without heating, but the mechanism should meet our interests. That's what we want. And the statements, or the statement of Chancellor Merkel, and she supports Ukraine and also Slovakia. Slovakia is providing more reverse gas to Ukraine. That is also an important element for energy independence. But at the same time, there is the process of trying to find a formula according to which Ukraine will cover the deficit we have, deficit of gas, because it is created because of the payment could come after the consumption. So we're trying to look to find a variant, to look at a formula when there will be without this financial gap in time. As to money, we need to reform to improve our defense capability. We speak about billions of euro. I believe that we have such money in the country. And if to reduce corruption, if we create conditions I don't speak about investments from abroad. Let's be honest, it's unrealistic in the nearest future, but the money that Ukrainians were taken to offshore areas, to use that resource. And also we need to do the same. We need to optimize our processes and our country. I think we'll live through that period and we'll be able to overcome all the problems. The only issue is it's impossible to do if we don't change the country. I speak about the structure of the export. We need to change it. We need to change and diversify energy supplies and many other issues. A lot of work that was not done for centuries. It's a unique case when people give a chance for the reform. If we don't use this chance, if we lose it in the nearest future, then there will be a very big disappointment. So the key issue is peace and reforms. And these both issues are important for us. 2 billion. Do you speak about euro or dollars that you need right now? That depends on a formula. Approximately, we need about $2 billion, up to $2 billion.
Ask you about something that always was brought up in the previous session with Mr. Lysenko, but it's a serious matter, and it would be nice to hear you address it, about the allegations published today or yesterday by Human Rights that the Ukrainian army has been using cluster munitions against civilians in Donetsk. And I found Mr. Lysenko's answer a little bit unsatisfying. He simply he denied it and said, "Show us the ballistic proof." And Human Rights Watch is not an organization. It's not some Kremlin-sponsored organization. It's a very serious and respected organization. And I would just like to hear you address those allegations. Thank you.
You know, I'm responsible for foreign policy, so I really respect any reports, and especially such an important organization like Human Rights Watch. But I'm not ready to answer you because be frank, now have the information and these facts. I read carefully that, but I think it's need additional investigation, first of all. The second thing, an important thing, that we need to have the complex assessment of the situation, and the true that not withdrawal yet, the having machinery and armaments, unfortunately on Ukrainian territory, tanks, and other things that must be withdrawn. That's most important thing. That's why I also want emphasis. This is very important to include all these things in reports. But once again, I'm not ready to answer your question. I think we need to have the special internal investigation in Ukraine, and we will pay attention on that. But for this day, no facts that confirm that information.
So you don't think that report is credible?
Once again, I respect this organization and reports personally, but I'm not give you official response. You ask Mr. Lysenko and maybe receive the final answer next days from Ukrainian side. But once again, we have had many times about that, not only from Human Rights Watch. And more important for us, and we agreed completely with this part of reform report, that civilians should not be killed by terrorists, should not be killed and attacked by books, by others. That's the most problem. Close the border. The problem that's okay for Human Rights Watch also, how we can investigate on that if we not have real closed border. We do not to protect these civilians. And the first priority, close the border. We waiting from Russia and from President Putin decision on the beginning of process of close these checkpoints on the border, verification and monitoring, including OSCE. After that, and not after, but now, bilateral ceasefire. Ukrainian army not begin this fire. We react sometimes, and this terroristic organization says, okay, we go to Kiev. Please include all this in reports. That's important also. So we need begin with basics, roots, and that's problem. Once again, I want to name it: close the border, stop fire, ceasefire, bilateral ceasefire, hostages, including Nadia Savchenko, and not create new problems for political process, for process of political regulation, as new so-called election. So all this thing important, and Ukraine, very responsible country, you know that, for many years, to implement all international our obligation, including this sector. That's why we need to stop this violation in Ukraine from different side. But once again, I do not have personal effects that Ukraine use this.
Ще два дуже короткі запитання.
Радіо Свобода, Богдана Костюк. Пане Валерій, дуже коротко.
Very brief question about reform in diplomatic sector. The rotation of leaders of the diplomatic missions have started. How long will it go? Thank you. Yes, I believe that elements of rotation are important. And honestly, we have delayment of the rotation because it was not clear about funding. Now the government provided the funding, and the rotation on the level of advisors, deputy ambassadors have started. It goes non-stop. At the same time, the president and we are trying to have higher requirements, more requirements to diplomats who will represent Ukraine abroad, and professional decency, patriotism, but also the emphasis is on career diplomats. The president focused us to give more opportunities for young diplomats. And if we speak about top positions of ambassadors, general consuls, today you will see, or in the nearest future, you will see that in key European countries, in EU countries, we will have young diplomats. Young diplomats are the most strong diplomats in Ukraine. And you know that criticism, there was criticism that we are late with the appointment of ambassadors. We speed up the process, and there were 3 ambassadors, and we appointed 3 ambassadors, and the president signed a document and appoint a lot of on appointments to too many positions in the EU and on other continents, including Africa, which is very important for us and an important direction. So we are waiting for decisions, agreement, which comes from those countries. So it will be according to the procedures. There is an initial optimization, and there will be a lot of criticism that we will have to cut the number of diplomats and embassies, or to set up hubs which will be responsible for regions. I accept criticism, but honestly, I would like that funding not to be stopped, and for us to keep our embassies in those countries where we'll have to cut, to reduce or to shrink our embassies. But because foreign policy is a very important element for peace, and we notice that in the UN, when the support of every country of all the world is important for us. We created quite a different relations with those countries where Ukraine had no relations at all. For example, Australia It seems like it's a faraway country, but the level of trust, of confidence between our leadership and their leadership, and the level of trust to Ukraine, which demonstrated the ability to quickly investigate MH17 disaster, where a lot of Australians were on that plane, that allowed us to look at our relations differently. So we think we consider an opportunity to also send a new ambassador and visits, official visits when the situation allows. And I speak about Australia. The same situation with other countries. The level of relations and trade relations. We had low trade, our trade relations on a low level, but it's a paradox. There is an aggression, conflict, and but the world has united around Ukraine, and that gives us a chance we can use bilateral relations as a chance, as an opportunity. So we speak. It's not only about rotation; it's about better efficiency in our trade relations, in cooperation with international organizations, and the issue of inequality for diplomacy and the issue of coordination. If we compare periods of development of our country, such coordination like we have now in foreign policy between the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Klimkin, and with administration department which is responsible for diplomacy, and I got that direction. And we never had such coordination. We work like one team. We help the president, and more of that. These results, maybe they are not that obvious in foreign policy, but in time, when I hope, when we are done with these difficult times, and there will be a adequate assessment of these efforts we put. And I would like to thank only leaders of diplomatic service, but all who work actively, creatively, and defend our interests, and also in the information sector. And there is a challenge. Because the resources, our opponents, to put it softly, what they invest, they invested 3-4 times more in this. So I would like to thank you for inviting me to Ukraine Crisis Media Center, but I would like to thank you also because you do a lot in the information sector to help Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention. All the best. Thank you very much. Our next briefing will be at 2 o'clock.